Good afternoon, guys. I'm Ryan Harrow, also a sales account manager.
And today we're going to take you through the Verisk products that are available within the Digimap portal, and over the next 20-25 minutes or so we'll run through a summary of the products and the product features, some use cases, and also how the data has been applied to address NetZero targets. And then Emma Diffley from Digimap will then run through a quick demonstration of Verisk data on the Digimap platform, and Ryan and I and Emma will stick around to answer any questions you may have at the end.
Great, so a quick introduction to who we are. So as a company, we formed in 1998, starting out as the Geo Information Group, and we began business flying and capturing aerial photography. So if you look in Google Maps, you'll see, if you click the next button, Jeremy, some of the imagery you can see within Google Maps will have the Geo Information Group as the copyright. Over the years, we kind of quickly discovered that actually the data you could extract from that imagery held more value, and therefore we started to build these kind of spatial databases. And in 2016, Verisk came to us for the data that we'd extracted for their insurance products, realized we were kind of onto a good thing, and instead of buying the data from us, they actually just bought the company. So that leads on to who are Verisk. So Verisk, who are now the world's leading insurance services provider. So while we're not offering insurance ourselves, we provide applications to help the insurance industry, and a lot of these services are kind of underpinned by data, hence the need for property data that they came to us for. They're listed on NASDAQ and generated $3 billion annual revenue last year, and they have 9,000 employees in 13 different countries. So the size of the company is quite enormous. If I just quickly go over a few of the customers that we help with our data, you can see them popping up on the screen now. They're just a few of our clients, and as you can see, it covers a wide variety of industries and different verticals. And we're going to delve into a bit more detail about how some of these customers are making use of our data a bit later on in the webinar.
Okay, so what products do we have on the Digimap platform? So there's three. First up, we have a product called UKBuildings, which is a unique database of building characteristics. It covers Great Britain and Belfast, so it's not strictly UK. But if you want to know something about the character, age, or height of a building, whether it's residential or commercial, this is your starting point. So the image on the right here is just showing buildings. There's no background mapping, there's no coastline shown there. It is just the buildings. It shows how the density of UK buildings changes across the country. You can see central Cumbria very sparse, but interestingly, you can see how the buildings hug the coastline and how so many buildings are built on the coast in this country. So the data attributes that you'll find in Digimap include the unique property reference number, property area, property age, the height, and the building use. And we'll go into more detail about those later. So the second product is our land use database, UKLand, and this covers Great Britain and Northern Ireland. It's perfect for small scale analysis. Maybe if you were determining the percentage of woodland in a county, or if you wanted to compare a couple of areas based on the amount of industry within them. Say if you're looking at Shropshire and Kent, wanted to see how many, what area is given over to retail parks in Shropshire as opposed to Kent. Is one area more urban than the other? It's particularly useful for making comparisons of larger areas for urban classifications. Here in the image on the right there, you can see that's an area of Reading, and the pink shows university buildings. So that's higher education buildings that are shown there. Next up, we have UKMap. Now, this is our detailed mapping of the London area, and it goes all the way out to the M25. It's a unique, detailed topography of London, effectively. So it's got land use and land cover. We capture detail about what's happening on upper floors as well. So we can identify different types of retail outlets and names of the outlet as well. should be noted, and we'll go into this again in more detail, that we don't continue to maintain UKMap. And one of the reasons for this is that it's simply too detailed to keep up to date. If you look at the image on the right there, you can see in some areas we've actually captured box junctions and road markings. And of course, I mentioned earlier, we've got retail outlets captured as well. Now, as you can imagine, in London, this sort of data changes at such a high rate that it's keeping up with it became impossible for us. So up to 2021, we're no longer maintaining that go forward, but I'll go into a bit more detail about that later on. But now I'm just going to talk a little bit about how, going back to the UK buildings data, about how we capture that. So what makes UK buildings unique is that it was captured manually. The vast majority of the data was captured manually. We trained an entire team to identify building archetypes from the aerial imagery that we've been flying. So, and this is vertical and oblique. Then what that team did, they drew polygons around buildings of the same sort of archetype. And this started in urban areas, but eventually was extended to include the entire country. Here on the right, you can see an example of those polygons that took painstaking and sort of lengthy manual interpretation exercise. This included capturing building usage, and building usage is a very tricky one. It's a very tricky attribute to define. Like if you think about the Shard in London, for example, does the Shard count as a residential building? I mean, there are residential flats, there's commercial offices, there's a couple of gyms in there, there's bars and restaurants and retail units in it. So how do you classify the Shard? And what's more, it also has a train station at the base of it. So we classify it as mixed use, but identifying predominant usage of a premise isn't a simple matter. But over the years, New Information Group and then Verisk, we've become experts in it. Height. We've also captured height data from a range of sources that includes LiDAR. Go into a bit more detail about that. But over time as well, we've augmented the data by including, a variety of different third-party data sources. And this could have been EPC, land registry data, planning applications, and some historic mapping. And over time, this is extended the attributes that we can make available, but also it's increased the geographic extent of the data that we've got.
Great. So that kind of quickly looked at how we capture the data within UK buildings. So now I'm going to go and look at these data attributes in a little bit more detail and offer you some use cases so that in the hope that it inspires you to use our data for research projects that you may have coming up in your universities. So UK buildings and building ages. So on the left there, you can see the age bands that we use to categorize buildings, and that's available in our database through the Digimap portal. The age of a building has a great bearing on a number of different areas. So things like the utilities and services that it can be connected to, whether it can be retrofitted with energy saving measures, whether it's likely to have cavity walls and to provide an idea of whether there can be extra insulation put into the building, all sorts of weird and wonderful applications. So we've recently increased the geographical extent of the coverage within the latest edition of UK buildings for ages. So of addressed buildings, so any building across the UK that has an address associated with it, we've increased the coverage from 84 to 99%. So very nearly all of the buildings with an address across the UK, we've split into these various age bands. So next, we'll look at our height attribute. The height is recorded in the database as the maximum height of any building. Again, knowing the height of a building is useful in a range of different areas, but in this slide, we'll focus specifically on telecoms as a use case. So building height in urban areas affects the line of sight that 5G masts require to be most effective. So looking at phone signal and stuff like that. We have a number of telecoms providers that use our data set to help them with the rollout of 5G, especially in the kind of urban landscape, which is quite a difficult thing to do. Cool. And another use case where we look at actually building age and building height used in conjunction to help achieve research goals. So a few years back, work began on a project named Crossrail 2, and this was a proposed rail link that would have connected North and South London, but that would have had to go under most of central London. The project's been parked since 2020, but there are plans to restart the project when the time is right, according to their website. But back when that project was first brought up, an engineering consultancy, Arup, came to us, and they used both our building age and height attributes to model the depth of foundations across central London, to help them plan the tunnel and the route of the tunnel from north to south. So one assumption would be that the taller a building is, the deeper its foundations will go. However, age also had a bearing on this. So building age and usage data indicated the type of foundation that the building had, and therefore could help give a more accurate estimation of the foundation depths. Great. So yeah, I just kind of touched on usage a little bit there, but again, this looks at another one of our key attributes. And the image on the right there shows an area of Cardiff where we've tried to find out which buildings are purely residential buildings, and you can see that they're highlighted in red there using the key on the right. You can see that they're residential buildings. So this sort of data is useful again for a wide range of applications, but just for now, we're going to focus on this kind of sustainability area, and clearly the type of a building and what it's used for has a great impact on the energy usage and behaviours within that building. So I think we're going to chat a bit more about sustainability and net zero later on in the webinar, but just to give you an idea there. Great. So yeah, hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight into UK buildings and its potential uses. So hopefully inspired you to see where that might be applicable for your own research projects. Now we're going to touch on the second of the three products that we've got available in the Digimap portal, and that's UKLand. So UKLand, yeah, as Jeremy's mentioned, it's a national land use database. It covers the whole of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and it's designed to help give users an understanding of an area. So whether that's a large scale overview or whether it's a more specific, like whole regions, or whether it's a more specific project work. For example, we're currently speaking to a client who are interested in just specifically areas of natural beauty and how outstanding natural beauty, and how they've changed over time. So what makes UKLand unique is that it goes deeper than just land cover. So the image on the right there, you can see an area of the UK which has been classified using the 27, I think it is, different classifications that we have within UKLand. Now, satellite imagery would be able to pick out some of these, like, for example, deciduous woodland. It could probably pick up just from the imagery itself. However, as I said, we go a bit deeper than that, and UKLand also offers kind of like usage more than just land cover. So you can see some of the categories here, like large complex buildings with various use, travel, recreation, retail. So there's certain things like that satellite imagery just simply wouldn't be able to extract that purely from the imagery. So that usage that we have there, which provides a kind of really unique and strong database, that actually is brought over from UKBuildings to supplement UKLand. I will just mention, so this is done on a 10-meter resolution, and it's vector format, as you can see in the slide.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. So what's some use cases for UKLand? Well, UKLand data has been used to assess natural capital changing over time. So in case you don't know, natural capital is defined as any element of nature that produces value or benefits to people directly or indirectly. Basically, it's anything that hasn't got something built on it. These natural capital assessment calculations, they're vital for assessing things like carbon reduction efforts and looking at encroachment into wildlife habitats. Local authorities and other organisations that are obviously very interested in looking at reducing encroachment into biodiversity and things like that. So UKLand's been useful for that. Another area, not very net zero focused, but it's very good for looking at capture of a wider area. So particularly in the context of telecoms rollout. So we mentioned telecoms a little bit earlier, but Openreach have used the data to look for business parks that would be appropriate for fibre rollout. And it's also been used in Scotland for identifying urban areas for planning the rollout of faster broadband. Risk assessment is another good use case for UKLand. So not so long ago, we used the data to specifically assess risk around Heathrow Airport. We were approached by the emergency services for this. So analysis of the data that showed that, and this is quite surprising actually, that 15% of the land within 30 kilometres of Heathrow Airport is actually water, which is pretty unusual. It's pretty unusual globally, unless it's a coastal airport. But it's an inland airport, but 15% of the land usage around it is actually water. Now, knowing this is vital for the emergency services, who they might want to have contingency measures for incidents at the airport. You need to plan for the fact that a plane that overshoots the runway or undershoots whatever might end up in water rather than on land. Okay, so the last of our three products, UKMap, in essence, a seamless database of the vector polygons with the surface topography of London. You can think of it as a sort of an alternative to Ordnance Survey's master map for London out to the M25. At its simplest level, it's got land cover, land use, and you can see the standard colouring here. Defines buildings, man-made services, vegetation, water, and woodland. We've captured retail names and usages as well. We find that we also know what's going on upper floors. For example, these properties here have got 3 H's indicating that it's residential on all 3 floors. And what else have we got? Yeah, it's actually got an address data in there as well. So it's an alternative to Ordnance Survey for things like addressing. But again, as I mentioned earlier, it should be noted that as of 2021, we no longer maintain this database. You do, through Digimap, you do have access to there are historical snapshots of the UKMap data. Now, and you could use this to look at historical changes in London over time if that's something you wanted to do a project about. I've got to stress though, this is most effective when you look at stuff at a macro rather than a micro level. It's hard to do precise historical comparisons because sometimes the date of publication of the data differs from the date of change on the ground. And you need to bear that in mind if you're looking at historical changes. If you look at a wider area and you can make more generalized, if you want to do more generalized temporal analysis, you could do that. Okay, so the growth area for buildings data in particular has been the NetZero arena. And as you know, you probably know this. Apologies if you already knew this. NetZero is the goal to move to zero carbon emissions by 2050. Now, if the UN have recently, they would very much like to bring it forward to 2040. So we may find that happens in the next few years. But why buildings? Why is buildings important for this? Well, 30% of the UK energy emissions actually come from buildings. And the UK also has a very old building stock. By 2050, 80% of the buildings that will be occupied in the UK will already exist. They've already been built. So there's a number of application areas where where our data is, high quality data about the built environment. It's really vital to drive good decision making. And one of these things is local area energy plans. Sometimes they're called LEAP plans. And the local authorities sort of create these LEAP plans, these local area energy plans, in concert with energy providers like E.ON or SSEN, etc., to assess current energy needs, future energy loads. And there's an example on the right there of some LEAP software that has our data in the back of it. And they've applied algorithms to make assessments of what the annual heat demand is going to be in that street for each of these properties, domestic heat demand. It's for future planning, essentially, and energy security. So people that are doing this, Scottish and Southern and UK Power Networks are just two energy providers that are working with their local authorities to apply these local area energy plans. Another area is assessing whether a property can attract green funding and whether it's suitable for things like air source heat pumps or insulation. And that needs data behind it. More and more funding institutions are approaching us, Verisk, for the data that underlies these algorithms. Finally, as with any new technology space, there's a lot of tech startups and a lot of them out there that are creating new innovative sort of applications and services and algorithms to help do decision support for these retrofit and funding assessments, and our data is part of that puzzle. Over the past 18 months, we provided data to a number of organisations that are working directly in the decarbonisation arena. People like the Energy Systems, Catapult, and Advanced Infrastructure Technology, people that are making software like this, and web services as well. Something else that we've so basically our data forms the backbone of the London building stock model as well. This was created by UCL, University College London, for the Greater London Assembly to support net zero efforts in the capital. Now, we'll provide a link to this in the PDF of the presentation, but this is for London only. As you can see, you can click on the building here and you can pick up its energy rating. You can get a generalized view. You can look at average height and CARB2 classifications as well, very important for decision support for retrofit. This is going to be rolled out nationally soon as part of the, I'll say, DESNES. DESNES is the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. They used to be called BEIS. And they piloted it with projects with hotels nationally, but it's going to be rolled out across the country in the next 12 months, we think. Right.
Great. Yeah, sorry, the slide just took a second there. So hopefully that's given a good oversight of the products we make available and some of their use cases, specifically in the net zero area there as well. So we just wanted to go over why we think our Verisk data is why it's beneficial for you to use through the Digimap portal. I mean, we've covered some of the reasons already, and I'm sure you've picked some of those out. But one of the main benefits is that the data sets are really unique data sets. And if you're interested in building age or land use data, there are very few alternatives to the data we have. Certainly not any that feature in the Digimap portal. They're highly accurate and consistent as well. So to speak on that, there's large organisations across the UK that have been using our data, and Ordnance Survey, who are like the national mapping agency, are starting to publish age and use characteristics of buildings using our data as source. That proves, one, that we were kind of ahead of the curve in capturing this data, but two, it speaks to the accuracy and the integrity of it, making it a really strong database for your usage. The other, and I would consider this a very key benefit, is that the data is free to use for academic research. So through Digimap subscription, if your university subscribes to that, the database is free to download and manipulate as part of the subscription there.
So how can we help? What sort of projects are you working on? Where do you see this data fitting into that project? Hopefully this is going to fire your imagination a bit. Are you looking at geospatial comparisons between two areas? Are you looking at livability sort of projects? So you're looking at access to green space, or are you working in the net zero, the decarbonisation arena, whereby you need to find homes that would be suitable for energy saving? Another area that Verisk themselves get involved in a lot is on flooding assessment. We have distance to water data as well in our commercial data, which I'll come on to in a moment. But yeah, you might be looking at flooding assessments, and again related to that, what about climate change impacts? There's a wide variety of projects that I'm sure you're doing, but just think about whether this data would assist you in that. So finally, that sort of covers the extent of the UK buildings data that's available in the Digimap portal, but it's worth pointing out that we as Verisk have a lot more data too. So commercially available, we have, for example, building materials, a breakdown of building elements, different elements of the building. We've got number of floors, presence or otherwise of the basement. We've got a distance to water attribute, that helps on the flood risk projects I just mentioned. The map you can see here actually shows properties in central London flagged orange if they do have a basement. And we've got national coverage of these attributes, but we've also added in things like energy performance, the EPC data where that's available. So that has things like glazing, fireplaces, roof, floor, wall type, U values for walls, etc. And as Ryan just mentioned, it's a unique source of data. And we've recently supplied the age, building materials and basements data to Ordnance Survey for inclusion in their new National Geospatial database.
Great, perfect. So yeah, I hope that's been useful to you guys, and hopefully you can see some of the ways that you can apply various data sets in your own research projects. Hope we've given a good overview of the 3 products available, and also shown how it's being used to help achieve net zero goals, or how we're helping organizations to achieve those goals. Just before we hand over to Emma for the demonstration, these are our contact details. We will be providing a PDF of all the slides, so the information within and the contact details you'll be able to find in there. And I think Emma may touch on this, but there's really detailed FAQs and supporting information on the Digimap platform. So there's also a really good resource there for you to find out any answers to questions you may have outside of this webinar. As was said by Denise at the start of the webinar, if you do have any questions now, me and Jeremy will be sticking around. We'll be glad to answer any questions you have. Just stick them in the chat and we can field those after the demo. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jeremy and Ryan. That's really interesting. It's quite a lot of data you've got there. It's a lot to get your head around. I'm going to run through briefly how you can get access to this. As Ryan and Jeremy have said, we have a licensing arrangement with Verisk that means we can supply all those data sets through Digimap. And let me just share my screen, and then we can talk about how you get access to it. So for those of you who are already familiar with Digimap, you'll know that the different collections are listed on the top of the page here. Verisk one is labelled specifically. Last September, we made a few changes to Digimap, which means that you no longer have separate interfaces for making maps and downloading data. We've now put all the functions into one interface, which is here. It's just labelled Verisk Digimap. For those of you who used this previously, you'll recognise it. It's all fairly familiar. The additional bit is this bottom tab on the left-hand side, which is about downloading data. Once you click on that, you'll recognise that too, because we've simply foisted the data download interface into that tab there, so it should work in exactly the same way. Going back to the mapping side of things, as Jeremy and Ryan have talked about, we have all the data sets in the mapping service here. Let me just see if I can move my window down there. There we go. We start off with the UKLand database, and as you can see, we can just zoom in on this. These are, of course, scale dependent as usual, so at some point the UKLand will disappear. If we open the base maps tab here and leave it open while I zoom in, you'll see how the different products become available at different scales. I can also use my search button. Let's search for London because that's where lots of stuff is. Click on there, it'll zoom right in. As you can see, we've got the 3 data sets available right there. If I zoom out, you can get a bigger picture there. Once we're out at this scale, you can see just the UKLand, but as we zoom in, of course, we get the UK buildings. Click on each of these base maps and you get the different data sets showing. And there's the UK buildings land use option. As we can see, if we zoom in a bit closer, let's find somewhere that's familiar. St James's Park is good, somewhere with a bit more variety. Here we are. That's Piccadilly. The information tool in the top bar here is this little I button. If you click on that, you can then select any particular building like this, and it will outline the building in red, and it will give you some of the metadata, some of the attribute data that goes with the data set itself. So you have to make sure you're looking at the right data set here. So this is the use layout, which will give you things like retail with office and residential above. And if you choose the age one, same, I have to click it again, I think, and it gives you a slightly different, does it give you a slightly different set? No, it doesn't, because it's the same data set. If we get the UK map data, I think this one doesn't do the feature information in the same way. But as you can see, that covers London here. We also got the aerial photography, which is fabulous stuff. My colleague always likes to look at the boats along the river, and I never remember where they are, but there's a huge amount of detail there when you can find them, if you know where they are. So if you want to download any of the data, let's just pick the buildings one here. Go to the download tab, and you can select an area that you want, like this, usual stuff. From here, you can identify which bits are London only, because some of the data sets are London only, or you can have the national ones. Click the one you want. This little arrow here will give you information about the particular product you're choosing. So you can have a look at that. Add that to your basket, select the right format, some shape, and I can put a name and request the download. That will then send me an email, from which I can get the link to download the data. So it all works in the same way that the rest of Digimap works. It's not any different from any other collection. Different data sets are available in different formats, of course, and there are some restrictions on how much of a data set you can download in any one request. That doesn't stop you making multiple requests, of course, but we do that to manage the traffic through Digimap. If everybody requested national coverage all at once, then the whole thing would grind to a halt. There's quite a substantial amount of data in Digimap, and those limits have to go across all the collections, not just this particular one. Going back to the mapping side of things, we have the usual map content, so you can have a look at the key here, which will give you a good idea of what's what. We have the bookmarking system, again, fairly standard across Digimap. We have the extra layers. You could add the UKMap tree canopy, which you can zoom in and see the different trees. And the upper floors data is also done as an overlay here too. So take that. Let's put UKMap on and then see if we can add this here. So you can change the transparency on these as well, so you can see more or less. We've then got the drawing tools as usual, so you can add your own markers to the map, and you can add your own shapes. I'm going to draw some random shapes because that's just to illustrate the point. Once you come to the data download, you can then use the drawings that you've added as the area for download if you wanted to do that. So if you use your annotations first, select the area, you can just copy those wholesale into the data download and use them instead. Have the usual measuring tools as well, and the information panel, which will tell you about which map you're looking at and what's the cursor move, which will give you the coordinates as well. So that is a whistle-stop tour of the data that we have. If we have any questions, I think Ryan and Jeremy are able to hang around for a bit to ask. Is that okay?